I don't really have too much data. I mean, we've had some pretty intelligent comments here. In 1978, Addington Oil and Phillips Petroleum came through the county and leased 25,000 acres for this exploitation of shale. And some of these leases were signed for $1 an acre. And when people went to resell their land, they had to go to the company and try to get themselves their land released from these leases so they could resell their land. And one of the big problems is anybody signing a lease with anybody or a permanent arrangement is that it permanently degrades and diminishes the value of your land. And one of the first things a potential buyer is going to do when they consider buying your land is they're going to have a title search done. Of course, these leases will come up, and you may lose a sale, or you may be offered half as much as your land was originally worth prior to the pipeline going through. So I would be very concerned long-term what you're doing to your land if you choose to participate in one of these arrangements. The question about eminent domain, if eminent domain is allowed by the state, this company will use eminent domain. There's just no doubt about that. They intend to put this pipeline through. And the people that come through first, based on my experience with Addington Oil and Phillips Petroleum, is they're really nice. They'll try to portray this in the most possible way. But once they have their pipeline, you won't be able to call these people at home to complain about some of the problems. The other thing that occurred to me was once they have a right-of-way across your land, being that that right-of-way is permanent, that doesn't mean that activity on that right-of-way will end. They could put a second pipeline through there once they have the right-of-way. So, you know, anybody in Kentucky who is dealt with our used coal knows that these very large companies treat the citizens of Kentucky with a very little regard. The freshwater contamination that's gone on in eastern and west Kentucky is just horrible. And once the right-of-way is through there, you have no control after that. So I would be very thoughtful about any commitment anybody makes to any company. I don't want to pick on Williams Petroleum, but any company that comes through and wants this sort of rights on your land. The other thing that also occurred to me is I don't want to be too hypocritical about this because any of us who drove here utilize carbon, and we all need to not only look with a jaundiced eye at this pipeline, but also look at ourselves and see how much carbon-based all our lives are. Thank you.
I like your last statement there, Mike, because we are, dependent so much on oils and so forth that does cause some pollution in our community and our country. David Hall, you guys hearing any on? Dave, got you. You want to speak? You signed up? No. Okay. Tom Fitzgerald. I told Tom last time I was in a meeting with him in Berrien County late at night. We almost got tarred and feathered. I'm not so sure I want to be associated with him today. Good to see you. Good to see you,
Judge. I'm Tom Fitzgerald. I direct the Kentucky Resources Council, which is a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization that provides legal and technical assistance to individuals and communities and local governments on a range of environmental issues. I'm really very appreciative of the Fiscal Court and Judge for setting up this forum, and it is always good to be back in this area. The Kentucky Rivers Coalition was the predecessor for the Kentucky Resources Council, and it was a coalition of farmers and conservationists who fought a number of the Corps of Engineers' big dam projects, or dam big projects, depending on how you look at them, during the 70s and into the 80s. The Kentucky Resources Council, which I've had the privilege to direct since 1984, was here in the late 70s, working with landowners and with the then Attorney General Beshear to void those leases that Addington had signed throughout the shale belt and Nelson County, which were onerous leases that would have resulted in devastating effects to the farmlands in Nelson County. The benefits and burdens of energy-related projects are never equally distributed. And the NGL liquids, these natural gas liquids, have certain benefits. They are feedstocks for a number of other products. But they also impose burdens in the transportation of them, as well as the extraction of the natural gas that is then fractionated into the methane in the natural gas liquids. And I wanted to address some of those burdens. The burdens on landowners whose properties are traversed by these pipelines, whose use of the property is affected, whose value of the property is affected. On the communities whose streams and public roads are traversed, on local governments whose capacity for emergency response for EMT and police and health and fire and public safety are already strapped and must now plan for a new hazard that is considered to be of low frequency but of catastrophic consequence, and that is the shipment of hazardous materials in liquid form under pressure through pipelines. I was extremely concerned in doing the background research on the regulation of natural gas liquid pipelines that, unlike the pipelines that carry the methane fraction of this extracted natural gas, which go through a comprehensive review process by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which looks at the necessity for the pipeline, looks at the environmental consequences and the public health and public safety consequences, that there is no single federal agency that has responsibility for assuring, first of all, that the pipeline is needed, and that it is not going to be one of the multiplicity pipelines that are being developed for the very same purpose. That the routing is done in a way that is respectful of natural resources, of public health, of public safety, and that all of the potential adverse impacts are minimized and mitigated. If this were a natural gas pipeline, all of that would occur. There would be a very public process, a very thorough environmental review, all of the different agencies that were involved, from the Corps of Engineers, which reviews placement of dredged or fill material in streams and looks at navigation hazards, to the divisions of water, to the endangered species agencies. All of these, and the public, would be involved in a very open and transparent process of determining if and where a pipeline would be placed. None of that occurs for a natural gas liquids pipeline. And the reason for that has nothing to do with the relative risks and hazards, impacts, and burdens. It simply has to do with the fact that the Natural Gas Act regulates the natural gas fraction, the methane, and the Interstate Commerce Act, which is an older act and passed at a time where sensitivity to these sorts of issues was not common in Congress. It simply does not address the issues, and that leaves a significant gap. And the impact of that gap falls on the shoulders of local governments and of landowners and of communities throughout the length of this pipeline. We believe that the Corps of Engineers has the obligation, in the absence of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to do this sort of comprehensive review from the beginning to the end of this line, including the repurposed portion of it from Hardensburg south. And we have alerted the Corps of Engineers that we believe they have that responsibility. It is quite possible that they will decline to do so, and we will end up in extensive litigation in federal court over whether there should be a comprehensive environmental review. Williams could step up and agree voluntarily to do a comprehensive environmental impact statement under the National Environmental Policy Act, which would provide that sort of forum for all of the communities along the proposed route to look at alternatives to the pipeline, to look at alternative locations for the pipeline, to look at the impacts, to look at special geologic and archaeological and community and historical, public health, public safety. All of those issues could be addressed in a comprehensive, thoughtful, prudent manner. And all it needs is for the company to step up and say, regardless of whether it's required, we agree that we will be stand-up guys and we will do this. I appreciate, again, Judge and Fiscal Court, I appreciate very much you're doing this. I would encourage you to follow up in each one of the magisterial districts with an evening meeting where we would bring in some of the state and federal and local officials to talk about what some of these impacts are. And so they can answer the questions about who is going to be minding the shop when it comes to overseeing this pipeline, if the pipeline goes forward. I would encourage the fiscal court also to work with CACO, the Kentucky Association of Counties, and the County Judges Association, and would encourage the county and Commonwealth attorney to work with those associations for every county that is along the proposed pipeline route to develop a coordinated strategy, to share information, to share concerns, to assure that the voices of the public through your elected offices are being heard. And finally, I would encourage you all to contact the governor's office and to contact the leadership of the House and the Senate, as well as your own senators and representatives, to encourage them to move forward expeditiously, to address the fact that no one is minding the store in terms of asking the question, is this pipeline necessary? And if it is necessary, is the routing the most responsible, the least impactful, the most thoughtful, and are all of these burdens being adequately addressed, the burdens on the individuals, the burdens on natural resources, the burdens on local emergency response? Because if they are not, then that is a burden that is one we should not be asked to shoulder. And we have a special session coming up on redistricting. This is something that the legislature, which already has a siting process for transmission lines, for CO2 pipelines, which present much less of a risk in terms of explosion and in terms of hazard, and for merchant power plants. They already have a siting board process that could very easily be modified to incorporate these lines. We have a certificate of need process that requires power plants, that requires other utilities to demonstrate the necessity for these lines and to assure that there's not a multiplicity of these lines. That law could be very easily modified to fill the gap that now exists, where no one is really overseeing the necessity and the impacts of this project. Finally, we've been asked to put together a handout, and I will be working with the county judges and the association, hopefully, and with the county and Commonwealth attorney. If you are approached and someone asks you for the right to survey the property, I was pleased to hear Williams admit that the right of eminent domain is not one that is assured in the Commonwealth. Okay? And until a court rules and a competent court of appeals rules on the inevitable appeal that right does exist for this particular type of project, it is a very open question. We will be putting together some additional material. We have a multi-page handout that's available on the web, and which I will provide copies for anybody that wants, with some background information. It was alluded to by one of the Williams representatives, and hopefully it is factual in nature. We certainly strive to be. And this is no alternative to going and talking to an attorney. But when you're dealing with somebody asking to survey the property, somebody asking for a right-of-way, someone asking for access to the property, you have every right to say no. You also have every right to place conditions on that right of access, because there are a few things that are more precious to many of us than the land that we grew up on, than the land that we farm, than the homes that we raise our families in. And that's not something that anyone should take lightly. You should consult an attorney regarding any easement, any right-of-way, any approval that is given to allow someone else onto the property. And you should not be bullied into believing that this is inevitable and that you have no recourse. I want to thank you all very much for being here. Again, thank the Fiscal Court, thank the Williams representatives. They've been very forthcoming in providing information to me on the phone regarding the nature of their project.
Okay, call on Debbie. Alton.
My name is Debbie Falcon, for those who don't know me. I have more questions than I do statements. When I first walked in the room, Mr. I think it's Hunt was alluding to that these two shales had enough to supply the United States for about 100 years. when Mr. Hawkins Ward, I hope I pronounced that right, Hawksworth, is close enough? Thank you. When he alluded to it, that this is going to be transferred to the fractionators, which are already in place on the Gulf Coast. I think that's right. I don't understand why the fractionators can't be built right where the gas is harvested if it's going to be used in the United States. So it alludes to me that most of these products are going to be exported, and that's the reason to build the pipeline, which is going to cost millions and millions of dollars to the Gulf. And it looked like to me that it'd be better to use the gas here in our country, which we're already energy short. We're energy dependent on other nations already. And I think this is a very negative thing. And if we're going to give up the right of eminent domain to supply companies and in other nations, I am very much opposed to this. If it was here, I'd feel more likely to give a right of way or more patriotism if this was going to be, or maybe even feel obligated to let them traverse my land if it was going to be used for us here in America. But this little portion that's going to be used to make plastic is a minute portion of what's going to be transferred. The majority of this is going to be exported.
On Heather Powell. Heather?
I appreciate the opportunity to speak, but most of my questions have already been asked.
Thank you so much. Hunter?
Most all of my questions have already been addressed. The only thing that hasn't been touched on thus far is, we are in an earthquake zone. We don't get them very often, but we do have them from time to time, which that's going to fall into our safety issues with this pipeline and causing leaks. Secondly, property values. That has been touched on a little bit, but I would want a real estate agent to actually address those in more specific. Some of us has got lots that we could potentially sell off of our properties. Are we going to be compensated for those building sites that we could sell off of our properties? To be more specific, in lines with the property values, and is the companies going to also factor in those issues if they were to purchase an easement? All the other subjects have been covered that I had on my list. Thank you.
Keith Metcalf, Manager District 1. He's got a question. He's got a red pen, look at it.
Yeah. Good evening, my name's Keith Metcalf, or afternoon, whatever it is. I do have a lot of concerns about this. I don't know, I've been approached a lot. It's going through my district, biggest part of my district. I've had a very lot of people that's very concerned and a lot of unanswered questions. My number one thing is, I think as a county government, by passing through us, that we should get some kind of benefit out of it. We do with our co-severance tax, we do with other things. I mean, if it does go through, I just think we need something out of it, because if it destroys our water, destroys the way we live, it's going to affect us. I mean, it's going to affect us greatly. And if we don't get a dime out of it, I don't know. Another question I got, why did you choose this patent? Why did y'all choose to come through Nelson County? Is there any set reason, or did you just map it out? Or did your engineers someday just say, let's go through Nelson County? I mean, I don't know. And another question I've got is, how many pipes can you put in this easement? Is there one? Next year you might come in with a 36-inch line. You may fill up the whole 50 foot. I don't know. I don't know if it is or isn't. I would like to know them questions, because people ask me and I really can't give them that answer. And most of my other questions have been answered. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Summarize, you've got a couple of questions. The money aspect, I think you did speak about the ad valorem tax on the value of the infrastructure itself. Not aware that, we don't have a whole lot of these in county. I'm not so sure that in years past that was part of the infrastructure tax base that we have. But are there any other opportunities? You know, we have franchise fees on a lot of things that come through our community. I could not, through research, could not find Tom. Is Tom still here? Tom, I don't know, maybe we can research too. The ability to have franchise fees or associated with any of the transmission of any fuels like this through our community. Of course, that's not, the money is not the total issue. The real issue here is the environment overall. That's what I'm hearing. I'm a pretty good consensus builder, and I try to educate myself, and you folks always educate yourselves, so it's not all about the money. So if you want to answer Keith's question on that.
One of the questions that was asked earlier was about road impacts, and we fully expect that we would be posting bonds for any damages that would occur to roads and any roadways infrastructure within the county, so that any damage would be repaired, or that we would repair, or if not, you obviously have our bonds. But we fully expect to do that and repair any and all impacts that we have from the construction process. As far as locating the line, that's the reason why we come out, send people out in order to get survey permission and actually look at it on the ground. The original routing of the line, first of all, we usually try and follow existing infrastructure. If there's an existing pipeline in an area, if there's an existing power line in the area, we try and follow those linear corridors that already exist in order to be able to minimize any additional impact from our coming in. So finding the route on a piece of paper, it starts out with a desktop study, and basically the people that we have doing that from an engineering standpoint start out trying to identify where the most constructible route is, and the one that avoids the most serious consequences. We try. There's a whole HCA, high consequence area process, that is identified in the regulations that we follow in order to be able to make sure that we address those, avoid those as much as we can. Let's see, what was the last? The routing. Oh, how many pipelines? That's a complete function of the easement itself. If a landowner wants one pipeline only, great, it's one pipeline. If the landowner is open to multi-line rights, which would allow you to come back and put another line in there at some later date, that's fine too. But what we're coming to do right now is to lay one pipeline, and that's what we're asking for. So I think that.
Is there anybody that has not had the ability or the opportunity to get up here and speak? Yes, ma'am. Your name, ma'am?
My name is Amy. I'm not the brightest star in the galaxy, but what you're just telling me is that your engineers think that building a pipeline on a fault line where there's earthquakes is the safest idea.
You know, those of us that live in Kentucky in this general area do know that we have actually had a few small tremor earthquakes in our community in the past. Thank goodness they haven't been worse than they have been. But it is my question. I'm going to ask a question to the folks here, because you're probably maybe not the technical crew here. You know, is this when these lines are laid? Is it in something that has some movable? You know, Kentucky soils move pretty regular. In some cases, yearly, monthly, whatever. Are these lines in some containment, like rock, soft materials that are filled where they have movement? Any other speakers on this subject here? Anybody else would want to speak? Because we're going to close this portion of the public hearing process. Yes, sir. Come on forward, please, sir.
I just wanted to say on
No,
that.
come on, please, up here. Please, we're going, we've done good so far. Thank you. Appreciate it. And your name?
Chris Powell. I know whenever it first came out on the Williams Boardwalk or whatever website, said they were shipping it all down to Gulf of Mexico for export. So, just all I wanted to say. What it said on the website, clearly.
Magistrate Sam Hutchins.
I just got a couple of questions for you guys. Sam Hutchins, good morning, everyone. I guess my first question is, if you guys, if the right-of-way, let's just say it travels borderline between one neighbor and the other, but because it's actually located on one piece of property, it doesn't affect the other. It doesn't appear you're notifying those folks, is that correct?
That we would not notify those folks?
Yes.
We would notify.
Like if it's here, but it's a neighbor, it's close to a neighbor.
For survey permission, initially, that would be correct.
Okay.
Depending on where that pipeline is located, I talked about 50-foot wide permanent easement and an additional 50-foot of temporary workspace.
Yes.
If that temporary workspace or the permanent easement, well, yeah.
But if it doesn't encroach on them, you're not going to notify.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I guess the next question would be then is how deep this line is it proposed to, how deep in the ground is it going?
A minimum of 3 feet.
Initial some of the right of way the folks are putting out for.
That's 3 feet cover, correct?
Yes.
Still, that's minimal to me. But I guess the third question I've got is when you guys come through, how close can someone then later on come in and build say a residence or a barn or a structure? How close can they build? What restrictions do you have with the minimum building requirements from the center of that pipeline?
That, for all intents and purposes, that's a local zoning or permitting decision.
And I honestly don't think we have anything that addresses that, but that's what I'm saying from your standpoint, from your line, assuming that catastrophically it were to explode, what is the minimum distance, I'm guessing, that you would have someone build?
We'd have to get back to you with that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
But we do have setbacks in our zoning regulations.
Correct. But we don't have anything specific to apply for as far as I know.
But it could be considered a structure, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You guys want to address anything else? Any other questions? Yeah, one more question here, then we're going to wrap this up.
Can I say here? You want me to go all the way up there?
Since you've spoken, I'm going to allow this last question, but we're not going to continue.
Just a second ago, you stated that the pipeline would go a minimum of 3 feet deep. My question involves, from what I've learned from, for instance, with what's going on with the tar sands pipeline, or the Keystone pipeline, that nothing is permitted to grow within the area that the pipeline is at. But from what we've been being informed from local farmers, they're being told that as long as they don't plant trees, they can still plant crop on the land of where the pipeline is going to set to go through. But if it's only going to be 3 feet under, when it comes to tilling up the land or having large things going across that pipeline, they're then going to risk a leak, an explosion, or severing the pipeline. Are these people getting mixed information, or are they not permitted to grow anything whatsoever on the allotted land?
No, they're not getting mixed information. They're allowed to grow that, and in situations, if you know what the use of the property is going to be, and you're going to be doing deep time plowing or something deeper than what 3 feet of cover on the top of the pipeline will allow, then we'll talk with you about what the appropriate depth is.
Yes, we're going to come on up. Let you make a closing statement, then we're going to move on.
First, I'd like to say thank you for allowing us to come and talk about this project. I understand that there are some concerns, and I think it's appropriate that we make every effort to address those concerns. What I've heard here today is that you have quite a few environmental concerns. A lot of them consist with concern the water, water tables, and aquifers. You're concerned about construction in earthquake zones. You're concerned about damages to the topography. You want to have a better understanding of landowner rights and what we as a company can do in dealing with you and trying to acquire our rights of way. You want to know what are the impacts to the county with respect to franchise fees, with respect to taxes, with respect to damages to roads and any other county or city property. I heard a big concern was that you're concerned about whether this pipeline project is going to be used primarily for exporting or for domestic use. I've heard that you want to know what additional benefits are to landowners, and that when the lands are laid, what kind of protections are we giving for things like pipeline movement. When I came here today, or agreed to come here today, I came to give a kind of an introduction of the company to the county. I unfortunately did not come prepared with complete engineering for how we're going to lay the pipeline. I just didn't have that information. We're so early in the process that that information is not available. Our engineers will be working with folks locally at the county and state level with respect to addressing a lot of these concerns. When we get around to doing our engineering, we will be working with folks who have the expertise. We will be looking at local folks and state folks who have that expertise and working with them. With respect to working with landowners, yes, we will work as best we can. We will address the concerns of unique pieces of property. We understand that these things are important to you, and we want to address those concerns because this is a pipeline, but more importantly, we are going to be developing a relationship with folks. Whether the pipeline is on your property, your neighbor's property, we're going to be in the area. And we want to be able to, and when I say area, I am not telling you that we have a definitive route. What I'm saying is that we are going to be in the area with respect to our neighbors. We're going to be hiring people along the way to work on the pipeline. During the construction phase, we'll be hiring local folks to do work on the pipeline. Again, whether it's on your property or somebody else's, we will be working on those kinds of things. There are some benefits to folks locally. I mean, when we hire construction folks, a lot of those folks are local. I wish that I could address all of your concerns today. I really wish I could, but I can't. Until we get through the process, and you guys will have opportunities. When you're impacted, you'll have an opportunity to make your concerns known, and we can address those. This is not a done deal, okay? Now, with respect to I can say this to you, that as we continue to develop or attempt to develop domestic supplies of energy, there will be impacts on local folks because those energy will be distributed across the country. Now, whether it is a 100% domestic or not, that's not really the key. It's whether we benefit domestically or not. Because even if we ship something overseas, there's a benefit here. When we make plastics and ship them overseas, that is an American worker that's dealing with and working to develop those plastics to ship overseas. Again, I would like to be able to answer all your concerns today. I cannot, but I will continue to make every effort to address your concerns and get answers to you in the appropriate manner and time. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
On the website.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's right. On the website. We do have a website whereby if there are questions that you would like to ask, you can feel free to go onto the website. It's bluegrasspipeline.com. Bluegrasspipeline.com. You can go there, and as information becomes available, it will be on that website. For those of you, I will leave my card for folks, and you can call me directly. Again, I may not be able to answer your question at that very moment, but I promise you I will get you an answer if you ask me a question.
Thank you so much. And I do want to thank yes, sir.
I have one question. What about the majority of people don't allow them on the land? What happens to the pipeline? Does it go away?
But they responded to that point earlier. They would try to work around your property, or eventually they couldn't get the eminent domain process. That's questionable. That's be in the court systems. That's the way I took it.
The majority of the people didn't want it.
That's right. I understand.
They kill it. We're not-
I do want to say, if he puts his cards back here, I have called Wendell on several occasions and he's responded, so I think he would try to respond, whether you agree or disagree with what he's saying, that he will respond or his company will respond. I do respect that. I may not always agree with people, sometimes I like to gain respect mutually. I see somebody raising their hand. Yes, ma'am. Let's do one more, then we need to move on to our regular business, if you don't mind, because I think a lot of good information is coming out. I've been able to educate myself further on this project. Yes, ma'am. Your name?
Nellie Lundy.
Lundy?
My name is Nellie Lundy and I live in Greenbrier. Greenbrier is a solid rock ravine. If any of you don't know, there is a karst between mine and my neighbor's house. And from what I've heard, there's the underground stream is just the whole knob. My concern is the effect of the dynamite blasting through the rock to this sinkhole that is between my neighbor and my home. And also, they talk about the value of our property, giving us the money of what it's worth. What is it worth when there's no for sale sign in our yard? When we have future plans and goals, or somebody has had that property for generations. Well, how do you value that? I think it is priceless.
Okay, this closes our public hearing process. Mr. Kirtley, if you want to come forward and present your concerns to the county fiscal court. If you would, if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome. Pat, I thank you for waiting. No.